obviously hoped she would turn up safe and well.
It's such a big lie. Why would he make that up?
It was so horrific. She was very talented, beautiful, and then you question everything.
A con man, a charlatan who was adept at getting sex and money out of women and who ruins women's lives in order to further his own gains.
The whole thing was shocking because we obviously thought we knew these people, and then all of a sudden you find that you don't actually know anyone at all.
Murders don't happen in sleepy little country villages.
Nestled in the rolling Sussex hills lies the picture postcard village of Duddleswell.
Dateline is a small village, nearly the highest point in Sussex.
It's an ancient hunting ground. It's a mixture of some wooded areas and open heathland. We're up quite high, so yeah, it gets the weather.
Dateline is in the Ashdown Forest, which is the inspiration for the children's author A.A. Milne and his Winnie the Pooh books.
It's tiny. It's a sort of blink and you miss it. It's sort of a few houses and the tea rooms down the road.
Probably 200 or 300 people, I'd imagine. Probably more sheep and horses than people.
It's close to, say, the city, London. So it's in the middle of everywhere and in the middle of nowhere, to be honest.
The best described as sleepy. In the summer, tourists come through and the tea rooms do a good business, but basically it's a backwater.
There's not a great deal that goes on out here.
But in 2008, something out of the ordinary did happen, and life in this idyllic village changed forever.
Hello, darling. It's me. Wherever you are, just please get in contact.
Local villager David Chenery Wickens is trying to reach his wife Diane, who seems to have disappeared.
I'm at home, wishing you were here with me now.
He reports her missing to the police.
Please, Diane. I'm going frantic here. Please phone me. Love you.
Every missing person case is treated on its own merits. So there will always be circumstances taken into account. Was this usual behaviour? Was there something about the individual that made him or her vulnerable? And according to all of those circumstances, we would grade a missing person either as high, medium or low risk. With Diane, it wouldn't necessarily have been treated as a high-risk missing person and wouldn't have garnered as many resources as perhaps somebody else would have done.
There must be hundreds of missing people in Sussex, and they crop up from time to time. Often there's a very innocent explanation. Often somebody disappears because they want to disappear and try a new life elsewhere.
News of Diane's disappearance shocks the local community, where she's a popular villager.
Diane was very pretty and very, very articulate, very well spoken and very interesting.
Lovely, really lovely, quite quiet.
But the rather reserved Diane hides a high-flying, glittering career, bringing a spot of Tinseltown to the Sussex backwater.
Diane was a hugely popular, super talented makeup artist for the BBC. She had won an Emmy, which is the top American award for television. She'd been nominated for a BAFTA, which is the British equivalent. And she'd worked on hugely prestigious series such as Pride and Prejudice, Casualty, League of Gentlemen. She was multi-skilled, and here she was at the midst of her stellar career.
It's husband David, though, who seems to attract the spotlight.
He was quite an imposing character, quite quite gregarious, quite larger than life. I think David was the dominant partner, a lot more outgoing.
He's also a star in the kitchen, where he volunteers at the nearby railway centre, the Lavender Line.
Very good cook, dished it up very nicely as well. Was charming to the customers, very pleasant, easy-going person.
David's other talents are otherworldly. He's an accredited spiritualist who prays with like-minded souls in the local community.
Our first meeting, he was our medium for the evening and took the service for us. He was very, very pleasant, very professional.
He did style himself very much as a reverend. David frequently appeared in the pub with his dog collar on. We didn't see him very much not in his dog collar.
Seemed to be no end to his talents. They just seemed a lovely couple. They got along well with nearly everybody, it would seem. They always seemed very normal, just normal.
Police delve into Diane's seemingly normal life. Then 6 days after her disappearance, appeals are made for her whereabouts in the local press.
Living in Sussex as I do, when the alarm went out that there was a missing person, this is not unusual in any part of the country, but the person who was missing was very unusual. To have such a super talented makeup artist at the BBC suddenly disappear seemingly off the face of the earth was a very good story.
Sometimes there will be an investigation which causes concern, which does hit the media interest and the public interest. Diane would have been one of them because it was so out of character. No obvious reasons for Diane to have disappeared. So that type of investigation would have gathered a lot of public and a lot of media interest.
The national media descends on this quiet Sussex backwater.
The first time I heard about Diane going missing was when I just came indoors with my husband and the front door knocked and there was a newspaper reporter talking, telling us that Diane had gone missing, and it really upset us.
It was everywhere that she'd gone missing. It was in the local news, it was on the radio that she was missing. It was, everyone was talking about it.
From that point onwards, there was a great deal of interest in the community. It did become a point of conversation very quickly.
A lot of the things that people were saying was that they just thought that she'd gone away, left him.
Her devastated husband, David, confides he fears the same.
He thought that's what she'd done and that she'd gone to London. I do remember hearing that a few times from a few different sources, that she'd gone to London, but no one actually knew where she was, which was strange.
Detectives dig deeper into Diane's last known movements.
Chenry Wickens claimed to the police they had both taken the train from East Grinstead Station up to London because Diane had a pre-arranged meeting at the BBC, and they agreed to meet afterwards at her hairdresser's. And Chenry Wickens told the police that he was there at the rendezvous and she didn't turn up.
Diane's mobile is traced to London on the day she disappeared. But something in her phone records doesn't seem right.
Text messages had been sent from Diane's phone to some of her friends. Now, this was an immediate matter of suspicion to the police, because if someone had deliberately gone missing in order to start a new life somewhere else, they would not contact friends in this way. So was this some sort of pretext to try and send the Sussex police off on a wild goose chase?
More suspicious was the fact her messages were signed Di, not her usual sign-off, Diane. Police suspect someone else could be using Diane's phone. And there's an unexplained mystery about her last known location.
The police established that there had been no pre-arranged meeting at the BBC, so she had no reason to go there.
Detectives need to trace where Diane went after saying her goodbyes to David at Kensington Station. So they scour the CCTV.
Ideally, the CCTV would start to be reviewed from the point that the two separated. So that would be the start point. Where did Diane go? Did she meet somebody else? Can we track her through Shepherd's Bush, White City and what have you?
They started going through all the CCTV footage and they couldn't find her anywhere.
Actually, Diane was never in Shepherd's Bush. And at that point, you would start working backwards along her journey.
Police tried to trace Diane to where the couple's journey began.
They also had CCTV taken at East Grinstead railway station showing Jeremy Wickens getting on the train alone. No sign of his wife.
It's such a big lie and so easily disprovable. Why would he make that up?
Duddleswell, East Sussex. Spiritualist David Chenery Wickens has been arrested and questioned about his wife's disappearance. He claims Diane accompanied him to London for a meeting. But CCTV shows him making the trip alone.
The police may well have had deep reservations about Chenery Wickens. They knew that there had been no pre-arranged meeting at the BBC, so there was no reason why she would have gone there.
A search starts at the couple's cottage, but this leads to a dead end. So detectives turn back to the CCTV.
When they confronted Chenery Wickens with the CCTV, which proved that he had lied in his explanation, he immediately apologised and said, I'm so sorry, yes, I did lie to you then, but that's because I was embarrassed because my wife decided that she was going to leave me, that she was so ashamed of our debts and so ashamed that our marriage was failing that she decided to leave me. So I invented this story. Terribly sorry.
Once he'd been arrested, it was big, big news locally, and the local paper was all over it. When we went out with David and Diane down to the pub, it was good fun. There's no signs of any issues. And then when you actually find out that something like this has happened, it's like a shock, particularly from a sleepy community of a few hundred people in a fairly affluent area. You just don't expect it.
Once his wife had suddenly gone missing, they thought, maybe he has something to do with this.
But with no firm proof David's behind the disappearance, 4 days after his arrest, he's released.
David was bailed pending the investigation. Effectively, what you had here was a no-body murder investigation. Clearly, the police suspected that Diane was dead because the arrest was made and he had been arrested on suspicion of that. Proving that a murder occurred and that David was responsible without a body would have been incredibly difficult.
The police were in a quandary. They could not prove that she had not left him and had disappeared wanting to start a new life. It was impossible to prove something like that or disprove something like that.
The police need to have control, and sometimes that's giving somebody enough rope, if you like, to hang themselves. Sometimes that control is sitting back and watching what happens. So that control is sometimes just space.
Police had to step up inquiries around the village and spreading in a circle outwards in a sort of search. But it's such a rural area, it's such a massive amount of land to cover, it was virtually an impossible task. And with a manpower shortage that Sussex Police had at that time, it was not the best use of the time. It really turned into a waiting game.
Detectives put the couple's marriage under the microscope. They speak to friends, family and acquaintances, trawling way back to when Diane and David first met. And they discover the respectable spiritualist Reverend isn't what he seems.
It seems that Chenery was working as a driver in a delivery company, and amongst his routes was to deliver to the BBC. So it seems likely that this is how they met, and he had at that time some skill or interest in reading tarot cards, and it may well be that this is how they first met, and that she then fell under his spell. She'd had a previous boyfriend, which was very emotionally disturbing breakup, so she was in a very vulnerable state when she met Chenery, and they embarked on this whirlwind romance. He was slightly older than her, that she could trust as a rock in her life. Within a matter of weeks of her meeting Chenery, she had moved Chenery into her Battersea flat. Now, he arrived with all his worldly goods and possessions in a carrier bag. To move into a nice Battersea flat was clearly an upgrade on anything he'd had before. That was the moment, I think, that he decided that Diane was a keeper.
And in no time, the couple decide to tie the knot.
There were huge red flags flying all around the wedding and the day of the wedding in the eyes of Diane's family. First, when they found out that he'd arrived and moved in with just a carrier bag's worth of his worldly goods, which suggested he must have a dubious past, shall we say, to say the least. Secondly, he couldn't find a single man to be best man. He had no male friends that he was willing to put forward. And so one of Diane's friends had to step in.
By the time they make the move to Duddleswell, the ex-lorry driver David has been enjoying his newfound wealth with Diane.
She had the financial input into the relationship. It was certainly her money that kept the house, kept the cars, and I think financially he contributed very little to the relationship. His relationship with Diane, even though they were married, there was a side to his relationship that she was completely unaware of.
Detectives discover Chenery Wickens has been leading a double life. By using his spiritualist charm, he's been exploiting a string of other women too.
He was a very plausible, charming man, particularly as he had joined the United Spiritualist Church, gained accreditation through them, and had taken to wearing a dog collar and calling himself Reverend. He claims that he could communicate with the dead through, apparently, a Native American spirit called Wild Fox. And there were many women, emotionally vulnerable, recently bereaved, who were ready to believe him. An opera singer, Chenery Wickens, had wanted £21,000 from her, claiming that he had prostate cancer. Well, he didn't. Secondly, an alternate therapist said that Chenery Wickens had told her that she should lend him money because he was going to divorce his wife and sell the house. Well, he didn't do that either. There was a whole series of cons that he'd carried out, often at a time when he was also having sex with these women.
Marlene Thompson started up a local spiritualist group with Chenery Wickens, but it wasn't long before she too began to question his motives.
At some point, he asked every one of us what the value of our houses were, and he seems to pick on people, especially ladies, who have confided in him with problems within their marriage. Probably just after a year of us all meeting, everybody was beginning to fall out with each other. I did know that David was having affairs with several different girls at one time. He kept it pretty quiet, I knew because the girls confided in me what was going on.
Chenery Wickens even targeted Marlene.
David did ask me to have an affair with him. I was very tempted at that particular time because my marriage was a bit iffy at that particular time. It's strained, and it is that when David knows there's a bit of problems, when women are vulnerable, that's when he takes advantage of them. I was quite infatuated, I suppose, because he was 5 years younger, but I couldn't do that to my husband.
And to achieve his aims, the so-called respectable reverend seems happy to lie about his own marriage.
David told us all that he was divorced from Diane anyway, that she was a horrible person, she was very vicious, and they had got divorced. We discovered that he wasn't divorced, he was lying to us. With all the lying and the way he was talking of Diane, I decided then that Circle had to close.
After speaking to his work pals at the Heritage Railway, the Lavender Line, detectives discover David's been spinning the same yarns.
He had been quite clear, as far as we knew, that his marriage was at an end. We knew he was still living with Diane, but as far as we knew, they were living, albeit in the same house, living apart, and as far as he told us, the marriage was ended, and she knew that.
They was talking about selling his house. So he's going to have to sell the house because him and his wife were splitting up.
But as far as Diane was concerned, they were happily married. Her husband explained the periods away from home womanising as time spent caring for his son who had a brain injury. Detectives discover this is also a big lie.
Diane chose, consciously or otherwise, to turn a blind eye. She stayed loyal, she stayed over-trusting, and she let him get on with whatever he wanted to do.
After Diane's disappearance, her husband's lies show no sign of abating. Whilst out on bail, he keeps changing his story.
He kept saying that she had left him and had gone to Spain and she was going to stay there, live there. So that's how he explained why she was missing.
Obviously for him to come up with she's gone off to Spain, when he had already said they'd gone off to London together for a meeting on the train and she hadn't come back afterwards, it obviously began to make people think this chap is not telling the truth. Certainly the people on the Lavender Line had their own sinister theories about it.
Lying is an art form. It really is. You need to know what you said to different people at different times about different things. And it's incredibly difficult to keep that going for any period of time. But being proven a liar only proves you're a liar, does not prove you're a killer.
But 4 months after Diane's disappearance, just a stone's throw from the end of the Lavender Line, a dog walker makes a gruesome discovery.
Decomposed human remains were found yesterday in East Sussex.
No longer a missing persons inquiry. This was a full-blown murder inquiry.
Diane Chenery Wickens was reported missing by her husband on January the 24th this year.
4 months after Diane vanished, a body is uncovered in undergrowth, 10 miles from the family home. Diane's husband David has been exposed as a cheat and fraud. He's the prime suspect behind her disappearance.
A woman dog walker made the gruesome discovery, but very close to the lavender line where Chenery Wickens had worked.
Forensic investigators inspect the crime scene. Local farmer Michael Fordham arrives soon after.
We'd arranged to come and cut our crops with the combine harvester. We arrived at the entrance on the A26 to be met by the police cordon saying road shut, keep out. There were police vehicles everywhere. I believe there was tents and people in white coats. So yes, it was all very intensive police investigation. The body, I believe, was found in this wooded area underneath these big trees. So not too far away from anybody, but when the undergrowth in July is all up and growing, very difficult to see, and therefore the reason why she wasn't found for such a long time.
The body's later identified as that of Diane Chenery Wickens. Her missing person case is now officially a murder inquiry.
To have one and a body found in a field boundary here was quite shocking, really, and quite horrific. And this is a quiet hamlet. Don't expect a murder, but that's a sad fact of life.
It's the news that Duddleswell and beyond is dreading.
Just shock, I think. Just couldn't believe it. Just felt very sorry for her.
It was so horrific. She was very talented, beautiful. Just, you can't imagine something like that happening, and then you question everything.
We all obviously hoped that Diane would turn up safe and well in some way, so it was very shocking to find out that this lady had apparently been brutally murdered.
The discovery of the body suddenly propelled the entire case back into the headlines. A multi-talented BBC makeup artist murdered in a remote location and a wonderful idyllic country village backdrop. It was a perfect copy for the newspapers.
Meanwhile, scenes of crime officers are on the hunt for the tiniest of clues that will link Diane to her killer.
And you absolutely cannot rush forensic recovery because you only get the one opportunity. You're now looking at what evidence can Diane still give us, what evidence can we gather from the environment in which she was found, and how does that relate to our suspect?
No attempt had been made to dig even the shallowest of graves. She had just been discarded in undergrowth. So wildlife had got to her, and of course 4 months of decomposition meant that a pathologist had no chance of finding out the cause of death, how she had died. There were other fascinating quirks to the discovery. Diane's wedding ring and eternity ring were missing from her left hand.
They're very personal things to happen. And although not necessarily direct evidence as such, would tend to indicate that somebody who knew her was involved in her death.
And there's another bizarre twist to Diane's discovery.
So alongside the corpse was Diane's very distinctive cowboy boots. And the police had to ask themselves, would a stranger make such a seemingly significant gesture as this?
Whoever placed them had left the stretching devices to ensure that the boot kept its shape. They were still in situ, so clearly Diane hadn't worn them there.
Now, there was no way a stranger or a random attacker could have found these boots with these shoe stretchers still inside them. It had to come from someone who had access to the house and to the bedroom. This was a serious mistake made by the killer.
So it certainly changes the nature of the whole investigation.
The finger of suspicion points firmly towards Diane's husband, David. the only other person with access to their marital home. With the body found just a quarter of a mile from the lavender line, his volunteer work there also puts him in the frame.
It's so unusual for a killer to dispose of a body in a place they don't know. You will almost always find a connection from the killer back to the location of a body.
David Chenery Wickens is re-arrested immediately.
The husband of an Emmy Award-winning makeup artist faces further questioning by police today.
The shockwaves were all around the fact that David had become a member of the railway, had become part of the village community to that extent, had become a ordinary Joe in the pub, and that suddenly we have very good grounds now as villagers to believe that he was not what we thought.
Wouldn't have thought he'd be capable of doing it or anything. You know, totally out of character. I think there was a certain amount of shock. Really, you know, do I know this person?
Forensic teams once again pore over the couple's cottage.
The home address would have been considered primarily as a crime scene itself, and then secondary as a source of intelligence about where Diane had been, what happened to her, and to prove or disprove David's involvement as the killer.
Hidden in a small wooden box, officers uncover Diane's missing wedding and eternity rings. They're sent off to the forensics lab, and the results are incriminating.
The police were able to establish that the rings had minute traces of blood on them, and what's more, clear evidence that they'd been ripped from the fingers of the owner.
The forensic examination of Diane's jewellery was useful because it showed that she was wearing the jewellery when she was bleeding. But it certainly adds that little bit of evidence, that weight of evidence to say she was alive when she was wearing that jewellery and had suffered an attack.
As the rings were never found on the first top-to-bottom search of the home, police suspect David returned to his dead wife's body to retrieve them.
The sheer callousness of Chenery Wickens could be seen in the way that he'd clearly ripped rings from his dead wife's fingers, rings that she never ever took off, according to friends.
Investigators soon uncover the killer's plans for his wife's precious rings.
The missing rings from the fingers was set the police in motion immediately to go and make inquiries at local jewellery shops and pawnbrokers. And it wasn't long before the police found CCTV at a pawn shop showing Chenery Wickens trying to pawn some of his wife's jewellery. The fact that Chenery Wickens was able to pawn it for a mere measly £100 or so shows the depths of depravity and deceit that this man was capable of.
Over time, many more of the Reverend's sordid affairs come crawling out of the woodwork.
So the confirmation that Diane had been murdered ran through the village like a shock bolt. And those women who had known and had, particularly those who had sexual relations with Chenery Wickens, were now coming forward, having realised that the man who they had trusted and had been taken in by and comforted by was potentially a murderer. And a huge body of evidence quickly emerged for the police.
One ex-lover tells police of a very sinister phone call.
Very close to around the time that Diane disappeared, David spoke to an ex-girlfriend asking how you clean up blood.
Her first reaction was, well, how on earth did you get bloodstains on your carpet? To which she replied, oh, I had a terrible nosebleed. Well, at that time, she had no reason to disbelieve him, however implausible that may have sounded.
Was advised to use salt. That type of evidence doesn't show David as a killer. It shows him making a phone call about how to clear up blood. It's when you start putting all of this evidence together, this very strong circumstantial evidence together, that begins to take things beyond reasonable doubt.
David Chenery Wickens appears in court charged with Diane's killing. And a date is set for him to stand trial.
This was crucial evidence for the police, taking the case beyond suspicions that Chenery Wickens was a conman, a charlatan who was adept at getting sex and money out of women, to evidence of Chenery Wickens being a potential murderer.
In Duddleswell, East Sussex, the spiritualist and charlatan David Chenery Wickens has been charged with the murder of his wife Diane. 8 months after her remains were found, her husband finally stands trial at Lewes Crown Court.
Chenery Wickens, despite the mountain of evidence against him, insisted on his innocence and pleaded not guilty to murder.
Individuals will have many different reasons for pleading not guilty. Some because they're clasping at anything to not be convicted. I think in David's case it was just, I don't want to be caught for this.
Court reporter Paul Cheston is there to see the spiritualist led into the dock.
I was at the trial for certain days. Throughout I sensed that Chenery Wickens was confident that he was going to get away with this case. He didn't seem worried by the amount of evidence that the police and the prosecution had assembled. It was very much a circumstantial case because no one had seen him obviously kill his wife or even dump the body. But even circumstantial cases can be very strong cases, and this was one.
Some people will go to court absolutely convinced that they are able to persuade a jury that there is enough doubt that they cannot be convicted. They have a warped sense of their own abilities. They have a warped sense of what did happen.
But the prosecution lays out the events leading to the night of Diane's murder. The day that she uncovers some home truths about her husband.
He was spending quicker than she was earning, and the debts were up to something like £17,000, and the shadow of the bailiffs was cast across their front door. She was getting very concerned. And when she found an itemised phone bill which showed not only the number of times that her husband was phoning various mistresses, but also the huge amount of money he was spending on gay chat rooms, and suddenly the worm turned.
It's believed Diane threatened to end their marriage. And the fake reverend responded with rage.
This was the moment when Chenery Wickens realised that she was worth more to him dead, when he could now sell the house and live the life he wanted to do, inheriting her estate, than alive, when all he had to look forward to was being thrown out of the house and a messy divorce.
Diane was a means to an end for him. And when his whole lifestyle was threatened, that's when Diane died.
Chenery Wickens murdered his wife as a spontaneous explosion of violence.
Though Diane's remains can't confirm how she died, the prosecution reveals the panicked call David makes to his mistress, asking how to clear up blood. After dumping Diane's body near his workplace, he then calculatingly leaves a message on her phone.
Wherever you are, just please get in contact.
As she lay dead.
Please, Diane, I'm going frantic here. Please phone me. Love you.
But the mask slips when the court hears from women and men who were invited over by Chenery Wickens for sex immediately after Diane's murder.
We came to know that he had a voracious sexual appetite. The prosecution's case was made up almost entirely with women who had been seduced by Chenery Wickens, whether for money or for sexual favours, who came forward and really gave a detailed picture of what this charlatan was like, with revealing insights. They gave evidence against him, some anonymously and others using their name.
Next, it's the Reverend's turn to take to the stand.
Chenery Wickens himself looked straight at the jury and told them about his great spiritualist beliefs and that he was a man of God. He laughed at the suggestion that he could be a murderer. He said that his beliefs and those of the church forbade any ill thoughts of or words or deeds, let alone a murder. And as a reverend in this church, he knew what would be waiting for him, presumably on the other side, should he ever do such a thing.
Now, he will explain to the jury, I had nothing to do with it, but I am the victim. And quite often when people take the stand, that's how they try and portray themselves, as the victim.
He tried to blackguard Diane's name by claiming that she was the one who was having all the affairs and not himself. He came up with a bizarre suggestion that Diane had not been murdered at all. She had taken her own life, that she had committed suicide because of the shame that she felt because of the mounting debts and because of their failed marriage.
But under cross-examination by the prosecution QC, the cool Chenery Wickens begins to crack.
By taunting him in the witness box, pressurising him, he was able to show Chenery Wickens losing his temper. And I'm sure this is when the jury thought, that's what happened that night. He lost his temper and he hit his wife.
Following a trial lasting more than a month, Chenery Wickens finally faces justice.
The jury were not taken in by any of the lies and charm and bluster from Chenery Wickens in the witness box and returned a unanimous verdict of guilty to murder.
The fake reverend is jailed for life, with a minimum of 18 years. Outside court, Diane's family responds to the verdict.
It wipes out once and for all the many lies that have been told about Diane, and it removes a dangerous, predatory charlatan from society.
The family never found out exactly how Diane died. The lack of remorse and the not guilty plea, I think, were all sentencing factors.
Diane's brutal killing has ever since haunted her village of Duddleswell and beyond.
You don't expect to have these sorts of incidents like this, and the shock waves that run through small communities like this are huge.
I wished I'd never met the man. I would never believe another word he said.
The whole thing was shocking because we obviously thought we knew these people, and then all of a sudden you find that you don't actually know anyone at all.
Murders don't happen in sleepy little country villages. To think that a husband can kill a wife, of years of marriage dissipated at a drop of a hat, it's a truly shocking image.
It was just frightening that something serious had happened on our doorstep.
This was a crime of passion. Everyone was gripped by it and wanted to know what happened.
It's quite unusual for somebody to have this sexual preference, but it's also extremely dangerous.
To hear someone doing that, stabbing someone ferociously when they're dead or dying, it was something quite horrific.
There's a heavy price to pay for that, all because of jealousy.
This was an unusual murder. It had sex, violence, jealousy, betrayal. It had all the hallmarks of a crime thriller.
My mum is heartbroken. She'll never be the same person ever again.
A quiet Sunday morning in the sleepy Hampshire district of Lee Park.
At 8 o'clock in the morning, the police received a 999 call from a very distressed young lady.
Somebody's had their throat slit at an address in Lee Park.
The police had to go to the house very quickly.
Having a call of this nature is highly unusual. Is this false and malicious? Is this somebody just having a prank on the police's behalf? I think the officers will be going there with an open mind, but with some trepidation as to what are we going to face when we get to this address. Police arrive at the address and they knock on the door. They can hear dogs barking and the door is opened.
Hello. You all right?
Yeah.
What's going on?
The police officer went inside the house.
Don't close the door.
One of the officers goes upstairs.
Had some kind of strange, interesting call about somebody having had their throat slit.
And they find a body in the bedroom.
The residents of Botley Drive soon find out something is afoot.
The place was swarming with police vans, police cars, whatever. They were all over the place.
You know, you couldn't see this side of the road because all the police cars were parked there, and you think something's happened.
It was quite overpowering, and you sort of wanted to know what was going on, but you didn't want to ask.
And you could see the activity, scenes of crime and pathologists and all that sort of thing were there. And it was just frightening that something serious had happened on our doorstep.
Word spreads to the local Portsmouth press.
So we received a tip-off that there was a serious incident taking place in Botley Drive. We sent a reporter out to go and investigate. The reporter went down to the scene, spoke to locals in the area. So it's quite clear this was a major incident. So there's lots of rumours swirling around. Some people thought possibly a stabbing, but it was all a big mystery.
The house is sealed off and the crime scene secured.
Normally when a police tent and cordon is erected, it normally means one thing, which is that someone's been killed.
The last thing on my mind was that it was a murder. To find out at the end that it was somebody had been stabbed, you know, it was quite shocking.
Yeah, it's awful. It's right on your doorstep. Think of it not happening in this area, but one day it could be.
Everyone just said, oh, there's loads of police, I don't know what's going on. And then that's when the speculation came and the rumours came.
No one actually knew what had happened. It was just an incident that caused a lot of fear, basically, and shock. There was a lot of questions being asked. People were concerned, and some people felt unsafe as well because potentially there was a murder on the loose. So it was an incident that brought the community together and caused a lot of concern.
Soon, senior detectives arrive on the scene.
In the background, there'll be checks going on. You know, do we know anything about that address? Is it an address we go to on a regular basis? Are there people living in that address that the police will know that they've dealt with before? You go with an open mind, but if there's no information coming back to suggest that, you know, this address is well known, we're always going there for domestics, you need to sort of have your wits about you.
At this address in Botley Drive lives 27-year-old mother of one, Shay Groves.
She had a young child who was 5 years of age. She was living with a friend. She wasn't working. From the age of 11, she was wearing hearing aids in both the ears because she was partially deaf.
In the last 6 months, Shay's been in a relationship with dad of 2, Frankie Fitzgerald.
In February 2022, they met at a pub in Cosham. And it looks like they clicked. He sent her a number, she rang him. At that stage, she was just getting out of a relationship. But she wanted something exciting. And Frankie came along and gave her the excitement.
But investigators uncover a string of texts, suggesting all is not well with the budding romance.
There was evidence of Frankie being dominant towards Shay. There were lots of text messages to Shay telling her what to do.
He had a jealousy towards Shay Grove's ex-partners, and he felt that she was actually seeing other men behind his back. There was a sense of distrust. She distrusted him because she still felt that he was still going out and getting in touch with his ex-partner.
It was established that around about April time, so 4 months into the relationship, that by now it really deteriorated, where Frankie's obsession and jealousy was getting worse and worse. Quite often it would end up in a really heated argument, to the point where we know Frankie had threatened violence against Shay and also threatened violence against her ex-partner as well. So much so that Shay was concerned that she shared this information with her friend because I think she feared for her safety at times.
A background check on Frankie reveals he has history.
In the past, there were cases of domestic abuse that the police had investigated, and I think he'd been convicted on one occasion.
Frankie had been before the magistrates' court in 2018 because he had sadly assaulted his ex-partner. And not only that, he had also damaged a mobile phone, the consequence of which he pleaded guilty to assaulting the ex-partner and stealing her mobile phone. There was a restraint order against Frankie imposed in 2018 that he should not be in contact with the ex-partner.
As details of the couple's relationship emerge, it's not long before police confirm they are in fact dealing with a murder.
The body is wrapped up in a duvet on bin liners in the bedroom with serious neck injuries that were non-survivable.
In Lee Park, Havant, at the home of 27-year-old Shay Groves, Hampshire Constabulary have discovered a body. The victim, 25-year-old Frankie Fitzgerald. The father of 2 has been stabbed 20 times.
Frankie underwent a forensic post-mortem. This is whereby an autopsy is carried out and forensic evidence is also captured from the deceased, but also a trained pathologist can try and interpret some of the injuries. And what was noted was that Frankie had had this fatal blow to the neck, but then there was also 19 other injuries around the chest area that wouldn't have been fatal because he was probably already dead by the time the first stab wound went into the neck.
The evidence would have suggested that effectively the main cutting that caused his death occurred around the throat area because it went across from left to right and cut the voice box, putting it simply. And then it caused torrential bleeding. It was so fierce, he would have bled out.
While forensic officers continue to comb the scene, a police presence is stepped up in the area to calm this close-knit community reeling from the news.
It's frightening to think that that sort of thing happens. And it's a real friendly neighbourhood.
It was a sort of strange quietness, like you'd lost somebody. It was like a cloud had come down over everything, and everybody was under that cloud.
Several miles from the murder scene lives Frankie's family. tragically unaware of the events unfolding in Lee Park.
I was at my mother-in-law's having a barbecue. Then my mum turned up and the first thing she said to me was, "Have you heard from Frank?" And I said, "Mum, he's probably asleep." I said, "He's probably sleeping a hangover. His phone was off, his phone's never off." My mum was probably there for about an hour when she got a phone call from the police to say, "I'm ringing about your son." And my mum said, "What one?" And they said, "Frankie." So I took the phone and they said, "Is Carla Frankie's sister?" And I said, "Yes, like what's going on?" So they said, "We need to come and see you."
The police officers make their way to the family home.
We was outside and my mum was obviously pacing up and down. They asked us to go inside and go into the bedroom. And the words that they used was, "We found a deceased man in a house in Havant with a slit to his throat." And my mum just collapsed on the floor. And I was just shouting, saying, no, this is not true. It was just bizarre, like, my little brother's been murdered. I still can't get my head around it, but it was just awful seeing my mum like that.
He had 2 children from previous relationships, and yes, in the past he was known to the police for domestic abuse, but it appeared he'd been turning his life around. He'd moved on. He had a good relationship with his children and a good relationship with his children's mother.
He was an amazing dad. He always went out of his way to get what they needed or to see them and take them out for days. There wasn't a day really that I didn't see him. I just miss his big grin he had on his face, knocking my door really loud. And I'd know it would be Frankie knocking, or when he went slamming the door. He was just amazing, and he didn't know how amazing he was. And I wish I could tell him.
The family were absolutely devastated, but everyone was rallying round to help the family, help his friends, and to raise as much money as possible for his funeral.
Meanwhile, detectives have been focusing on the bedroom where Frankie's body was found. Items discovered at the home of girlfriend Shay Groves begin to ring alarm bells.
She had numerous pictures on her wall of famous killers. You had Charles Bronson, Myra Hindley, Rose West, the Yorkshire Ripper, numerous books. This is not normal.
Shay was someone who had an interest in knives. She had axes.
And scenes of crime officers find a potentially lethal air gun in one of Shay's bedroom drawers.
On the right side of the bed, she had a coffin-style bookcase which had all the gang killings and gangland people and so forth.
It was very dark and twisted, I suppose.
Elsewhere in the house, even coffee cups reveal this morbid fascination.
Shay Groves was someone who was obsessed almost with true crime documentaries. She had a fascination with serial killers, killing.
We've noticed from looking at previous social media pictures that over the last couple of years, her appearance started to change. She went from wearing sort of bright clothes and being sort of quite outgoing to started going in on herself and becoming almost gothy. Dark clothing, lots of dark makeup. She started to have tattoos, very visible tattoos. So visible you can see them on her face and on her neck. So there's obviously something going on in the background there that's making her change her appearance like that.
She became a god, as we understood it, as a result of her becoming friendly with a partner who was her boyfriend around that stage. They were both goths. They had a weird sense of humor, in a sense that they were dressing up in goth clothes and all that. They also were practicing pagan practices, and she had a Celtic dagger with her, which was supposed to be for pagan practices.
Back at the crime scene, police uncover more disturbing evidence.
Also within Shay's home were a number of CCTV cameras, Now, ordinarily, a CCTV camera would be facing the outside and it will be there as a crime prevention type of mechanism to stop intruders breaking into your house. But what was particularly strange about this case is that Shay actually had them set up inside the house.
Shay had CCTV video cameras in her bedroom, in the lounge, in the kitchen. The ones in the bedroom were used to record her and Frankie having sex. They would then watch these videos back and then carry out what they had seen.
The police recovered a number of videos.
There were CCTV footage of them committing violent sexual acts together. It involved sexual acts of what's known as BDSM, bondage, dominance, submission, and masochism.
What we established that was common between the two of them was that they had this almost unhealthy sexual interest, and it's unusual to try and find a partner that has the same sort of sexual preference as you. So the fact that these two had this thing in common made it quite unique, but also extremely dangerous.
Miss Groves had a passion for kinky sex to the extent that she likes knives being used on her, knives being run over her, and so forth.
One of the elements of there was a thing called knife play. Now, this is where they would act out a sexual act where one of them is in possession of a knife and holding it to the other's throat whilst they have sexual intercourse.
The footage reveals these dangerous sexual games are fueled by Class A drugs.
Frankie and her very quickly got into the habit of cocaine. And cocaine became the center point of the relationships, whereby they were sniffing cocaine and having sex and videoing their sexual acts. They were exploring their sexual acts to the very limit with the use of cocaine and other things.
Shay and Frankie's mutual interest in rough sex and BDSM dominated the relationship. The boundaries became somewhat blurred, I think, with what they were doing. So there'd be a lot of role playing. Shay would be someone who enjoyed being spoken down to and humiliated. Frankie would regularly spank her and talk to her in a derogatory fashion. And this was something that consumed the relationship and was the cornerstone of the relationship.
They signed what's known as a sexual contract. I called it the 50 Shades of Grey sexual contract because it resembled everything of it. In it, it gave Frankie the permission to wake up Shay Groves every morning with sex. It was signed by Frankie Fitzgerald, signed by Miss Groves, and countersigned by the friend.
One of the videos that the police recovered from the address was a particularly brutal sexual act between the two parties, and that is really, really disturbing. With a knife, one doesn't have to describe any further how high risk that is, particularly when one of the parties or both of the parties may be high on cocaine or alcohol.
As detectives trawl on through Shay's sordid CCTV footage, they're drawn to something rather sinister. Her lethal Celtic dagger appears in the unlikeliest of places.
There were evidence that we found from CCTV footages where she actually puts the knife underneath her bed, underneath a pillow. On one occasion, after sex, Frankie Fitzgerald actually saw the knife. He says, "Why do you have it? Do you intend to stab me in the throat?" And what is the coincidence of Frankie Fitzgerald saying, "I'm going to stab you in the throat," and Frankie Fitzgerald being actually stabbed in the throat later on within a few weeks?
Police have no option but to make an arrest.
What's going on?
Sorry,
No, don't close the door.
They turned up and Shay Groves was there in her pink dressing gown, smoking a cigarette, acting as cool as you like.
This was an unusual reaction. When she was talking to the police officers, she was as if nothing was wrong.
It didn't appear surprising that the police were there. It's almost as if she knew they were coming.
Shay Groves told them that there was a body upstairs.
Absolutely no tears, nothing. No concern for him anything of that nature. It was a chilling video, a chilling body-worn camera to actually watch.
Arrest on suspicion of murder. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. The necessity for your arrest is for a prompt and effective investigation. Okay.
But when the officers arrested her on suspicion of murder, she didn't put up a fight. She then directed the officers to say where the weapon was. And sure enough, there was this Celtic dagger still in the sink with blood on it.
Lee Park, Havant. 25-year-old Frankie Fitzgerald has been found dead with his throat slit in the bedroom of 27-year-old Shay Groves.
Mum is heartbroken. We haven't just lost Frankie, we've lost our mum too. She'll never be the same person ever again. Yeah, he was very special. He was special to everyone. And it's just a void that's going to be in the rest of our life. Well, our hearts are going to be breaking for the rest of our life.
Arrest on suspicion of murder. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention...
Mum of one, Shay, has been arrested on suspicion of murder.
After she was arrested, she was taken to the police station, and at the police station, she was seen by a registered nurse.
Shay was then subjected to a number of police interviews during the course of her time in custody.
She slowly went on to have legal advice. And during the course of the first interview, on the advice of a solicitor, she made no comment.
In the meantime, detectives have been questioning one of Shay's friends. In a bombshell interview, the friend reveals a strange video call she had from Shay straight after the killing.
You then have this bizarre situation where Shay's starting to giggle and saying, "Can you keep a secret? I've done something, can you keep a secret?" And she proceeds to walk upstairs, still on FaceTime with her friend, and then turns the camera to show her Frankie's lifeless body on the floor with clear stab wounds around the neck and says words to the effect of, "I've done him, I've done him." She's always described as having a bit of a weird sense of humour. So initially she's thinking, is this one of these pranks that Shay might pull? You know, is this just some sort of weird thing that she's just trying to pretend that they've had some kind of game and Frankie's pretending to be dead? So she doesn't quite believe her, and you can see why. But Shay then gets the camera phone and actually puts it really close to Frankie's body, so she can really see the graphic images of the injuries that she's caused towards Frankie.
She was showing the blood spots on the books themselves and says, blood here, blood there, blood here. That's what the police officers found. What they also found when the first police officer went up to the room, apart from finding the body, they had this pungent smell of bleach, where there was an attempt to clean up the place, because the friend was telling the police officers when she was being video interviewed that she actually saw her with a bowl with water trying to clean the place. She had taken the camera towards the kitchen area, towards the sink, and shown her the knife where she used the murder weapon.
In the same video call, the friend claims Shay also admitted to stabbing Frankie while he slept. Detectives put this to Shay during her interview.
And so they were putting questions to Shay that effectively she had murdered Frankie in his sleep.
Her attitude during the second and third interview completely changed because she was so arrogant. And she was using words like, "Look, don't waste my time." I'm paraphrasing it. "Don't waste my time. I know what I'm here for."
Strangely, she started talking, and actually one of the questions she then fired back at the police officers was, well, if I killed him in his sleep, why is there no blood on the bed? As we know, Shay was obsessed with true crime documentaries. She would be aware of forensic evidence and how to dispose of forensic evidence. Now, what we do know is that Frankie's body had been moved and been wrapped up in a duvet. So I think the inference there is that it's likely that if Frankie was sleeping, he was sleeping on top of the duvet and he was stabbed, and she's then wrapped him in the duvet and then transported him from the bed to the floor on top of the bin liners. She's forensically aware because of her knowledge of all these true crime documentaries that she watches. She knows that by wrapping the body in bin liners, it's less likely to leak fluid into the house.
Shay effectively leaves no trace of Frankie's blood on the bed.
What is even more interesting about her demeanor was the fact that she's told the police officers, "You will find things about us in the video." She says she had been suffering from the months of sexual abuse that she'd been suffering from Frankie Fitzgerald. The abuse in a sense that it was violent sex. She was raped by him. She didn't consent to rape.
Shaya started to hint that she may have been a victim of sexual violence from Frankie and that this attack was due to her defending herself.
Shay was now trying to form a defence, and that defence was self-defence. So in effect, what she is saying is that she was being attacked by Frankie, and in order to protect herself, she had to inflict harm on him to stop him harming her.
What happened was that he went towards her and grabbed her in the bed and strangled her, and she was losing consciousness. She then struggled to find something to hit him with, and she thought she found a box, and she was trying to hit him with the box. Turned out it was a knife, and she stabbed him. It was sheer arrogance, something that you don't normally find when someone is saying, "I've been a victim of abuse, I've been a victim of coercive control, and I killed somebody." Not a shred of emotion.
Whilst looking into Shay's abuse claims, detectives dig deeper into the background of their suspect. Although she paints herself as the victim, the truth isn't quite what it seems.
We established that Shay would often carry a knife, and she would self-harm on occasions, small cuts in her legs and that kind of stuff. But also she would threaten violence against others, and there are a number of occasions that are reported whereby Shay had used violence against other people, or at least threatened violence against other people. And the fact that she secretly carried a knife with her wherever she went is a real concern.
Friends reveal Shay called her housemate Chucky after the knife-wielding killer doll in the horror film Child's Play, and more sinister details are revealed to the police.
It was a strange relationship. Shaya had a lot of emotional control and influence over her. Her friend was subservient and would do whatever she wanted. She'd run errands, even put on Shaya's socks for her.
She would effectively use her as a house mistress to look after the house, clean up, and on one occasion, I believe she was made to tie Shay's shoelaces for her. You know, that is strange behaviour.
And what Shay Groves did was that she treated her as a slave. Slave in every sense of the word, where she screamed at her, she got her to do her washing, ironing, cleaning, feeding her child, go out and buy food. The dynamics was in such a stage where she was effectively controlling her.
On a couple of occasions, Shaya turned violent towards her as well.
On one occasion, she pulled her around the hair and dragged her throughout the house because the friend had gone out and had not told her where she was. On a second occasion, what she did was that she picked up a nail clip and hit her on the head that caused her to bleed. The friend saying she can blow hot and cold, she can be violent at 1 minute, and within seconds she can turn out to be a normal person.
The police identified controlling behaviour, but they also identified manipulative behaviour. And it transpired that Shay had told a number of people, including Frankie, that she was suffering from cancer and that she was undergoing treatment. And it just didn't exist. It was completely fictitious.
And that is the most vile thing that anybody can think about. And she's manipulating all this and trying to get sympathy, money, and all these kind of things on the pretext of cancer. It is a heinous act.
But according to her acquaintances, Shay's deceit didn't stop there.
One of the chilling and telling features about Miss Grove's personality was her ability to use these sexual footages that she had taken of her having sex with Frankie Fitzgerald, her ex-partner, to manipulate them and to blackmail them to do things. She actually manipulated Frankie Fitzgerald by saying she's going to publish this to the newspapers. There's one occasion where there is the CCTV footage that the police found, and she actually said, if I show this to the police, they will think that you are abusing me.
Shea made threats to post them on social media due to her jealousy and problems in the relationship with Frankie, and wanted to ruin his life.
Shea even sent the sex video to her friends.
It was showing a very violent sexual act taking place without the consent of the other party. So in effect, Shea was being raped by Frankie, and that just wasn't the case. The police were able to get the original footage of this video, and when they analysed it, it was clear that the footage had been edited by Shea.
It was consensual sexual acts, and what she had done is that she had manipulated a number of footages by cutting and pasting them out of time and sending them off to their friends, saying this is how he's been aggressive towards me.
Soon, detectives uncover a chat between Shea and a friend, accidentally picked up on her CCTV. In it, Shea discusses ways to cause Frankie serious damage.
Having received this information that Shea is getting to a point where she wants to either cause Frankie harm directly or get somebody else to cause harm towards Frankie, that really does start to rub against a defence of self-defence that she is starting to show. It's starting to now show a pattern of perhaps this is pre-planned. Jay Groves is charged with Frankie Fitzgerald's murder, and a trial date is set at Winchester Crown Court. She attends court. The charges are put towards her, and the defence claim that their client, Shea, is going to be pleading self-defence and also diminished responsibility. And so the prosecution now have to disprove that this was not a case of self-defence or a momentarily loss of control, that this was actually cold-blooded, pre-planned murder.
Six months after the killing of Frankie Fitzgerald in Lee Park, Havant, his girlfriend Shea Groves finally faces justice at Winchester Crown Court. The atmosphere is fever pitch.
There's a lot of public interest in the case, a lot of media there. This is obviously a big story, a national story. A woman who was interested in serial killers, gangsters, true crime. So this was an unusual case and had a lot of interest as a result.
Shea's plea remains not guilty.
And the defence was self-defence as a starting point, and if she was successful, it would have led to a full acquittal, so she would have walked out not guilty verdict. The two defences that reduces murder to manslaughter are loss of control and diminished responsibility. So she would still be sentenced, but the sentence would not be as high as a sentence for murder, which is a minimum term of life.
With the stakes so high, Frankie's sister Carla is also at the trial.
It was horrible. And obviously just straight after Christmas. Obviously the first Christmas without Frank. So yeah, it was really difficult. I had like an anxiety attack. I had to go outside. It was a bit much for me. I couldn't really deal with it. I was really nervous. Obviously I've never been to a court even, or even a murder trial.
The prosecution needs to prove that Shea killed Frankie in cold-blooded murder.
In the bedroom, unusually a few weeks before the killing itself, the cameras have been taken down. So we had to rely on telephone evidence, WhatsApp messages, conversations, a camera that was in the kitchen, the housemaid's bedroom, noises in the background. And the police officers and we as a prosecution team sat down together and worked together to produce a timeline from the time Frankie Fitzgerald came into the house.
Using this patchwork of evidence, the court relives the last 24 hours of Frankie's life.
So on Saturday, the 16th of July, 2022, we know that Frankie goes to Botley Drive to visit Shay. They're taking cocaine, they've taken alcohol. Again, it's just building up to be this real pressure cooker environment.
I see the CCTV and her and Frankie were in the kitchen playing music and talking, and obviously the songs that he played were the songs he played with me, so that really hurt that they were the last songs he would ever hear. So yeah, that was really heartbreaking.
At about 3 o'clock in the morning on Sunday the 17th of July, Frankie and Shay are both still having arguments about ex-partners.
And obviously we heard her call him up to his own death.
She calls Frankie to come to bed. He goes upstairs and falls asleep. While Shay's going through Frankie's phone, she uncovers a message where a female purporting to be 13 years of age has been contacting Frankie through social media. Now, Shay clearly loses it as a result of seeing that message and gets extremely jealous. But what she didn't know was that Frankie had actually blocked that individual because of the age. And what she also didn't realise was this girl was in fact 17. But that was the final straw that broke the camel's back.
And within a few minutes later, there was the scream.
And she stabs him in the neck.
And then afterwards, she then delivered another 19 blows to his heart and chest area, all of which would have been fatal in themselves.
In a fit of rage, it was a brutal action by the defendant. And the friend said that she had sent a message to her at 5 o'clock in the morning saying that Frankie had left her and there was a big fight. Words to the effect like, he's gone, he's left for the day. The import of the message was that she was setting up a lie.
But then Shay changes tack, video calling her friend to gloat in the killing. And it was Shay's friend who decided to turn her in.
And the moment she called the police, it was the recording that we played to the jury, which had such a chilling effect, explaining what the defendant had told her about the lies she had created to set up an alibi.
Shay had made admissions to her in the FaceTime call saying that he was asleep, and that's when she stabbed him. Shay had made various threats in the past to harm Frankie. If your victim is asleep, how can you feel threatened so much that you have to defend yourself by fatally stabbing somebody? The prosecution were able to show that self-defense just wasn't possible.
Next, it's the turn of Shay Groves herself to take to the stand.
She came across as a very assertive, very controlled, very informative, well-versed with the case. So she was the sort of person who could look after herself. And that portrayed a person who could not have lost control at all.
She came across as rather bolshy and cold and a bit arrogant. She was certainly giving it back to the prosecutor.
When she gave evidence, her reason for why she had told her friend that Frankie was asleep was because she was trying to protect him because of his reputation, children. She didn't want to say anything about him being excessively violent towards her. And now when she walked into the witness box, she was telling the real truth, which we did not accept.
And her version of the truth was that, her and Frankie had been fighting.
She said she had been pinned on the bed, she was struggling to breathe.
She had reached out to get a money box, but accidentally grabbed a dagger and stabbed him in the neck. I mean, it's almost laughable listening to this account.
But the court is stunned by what Shay says next.
When she gave evidence, she actually admitted that she could actually see him gurgling with blood, and she stabbed him to prevent him from gurgling. In a sense, she was doing him a favor by sending him off.
It's quite a strange thing to hear in court, and to hear someone doing that, stabbing someone ferociously when they're dead or dying. It was quite harrowing to hear.
But in dealing with Shay's abuse claims at the hands of Frankie, there are even more harrowing moments for the jury.
There was a sequence of CCTV footages that we had to play to the jury. He was smacking her, and she was saying, "Yes, Daddy, what's my punishment, Daddy?" And he was having sex with her, and then she was crying. It was horrific to look at. 1 or 2 jurors actually were in tears when they saw this. But what the prosecution said, what the Crown said, was that this was all consensual.
She didn't really have a defence, to be honest. He was innocent. He didn't deserve to go like this. No one does.
What we told this jury was that this is a manipulative, jealous, cunning woman, and her jealousy led her to killing him. And that is the reason why he died. This is not a case of self-defense.
The jury retires to consider its verdict.
The jury retired for 4 days. To some people, it was the most agonizing 4 days because you didn't know what was going through their mind. When they came in, it was a hushed courtroom. And this is the point where it's like the drum roll moment.
The verdict was guilty. And it was just the best feeling ever.
And at that point, or in the moments afterwards, while Shay was still in the dock, she smiled, which I found something to be a rather strange reaction, considering she was now going to be spending many years behind bars.
My mum just broke down. Obviously, we were happy she got guilty, but never going to bring Frankie back.
Shay Groves is sentenced to life with a minimum term.
She was sentenced to 23 years, which is some sort of justice, but how many years she got, it's not the end for us.
So she'll be 50 years of age by the time she gets out. She's lost that relationship with her daughter. There's a heavy price to pay for that, all because of jealousy.
He might be gone, but he's left the most amazing memories. Love. 2 beautiful children that will always live in him. And I will miss him for the rest of my life.
Yo, có phong trang cái sân lu, lông cù xếp gì nhọc đầu lộc nít, cục chop nục lô sleep, bro, hope lúc nít, smooth draw high stop nose, ngập hậu trôi kẹp ngọc, cục bập chi cú nose, sis mùi kẹp nov, mùi kẹp xiêm kẹp trong nose, rồi cục sov, cục chi số tuần rock trong high school, cục hân nov không vội, nhọc đầu lộc nít, cục fluk của nhỏ, nose yop trôi kẹp chúc trong mốt, rock trôi kẹp fluk bị trong cục high school for pool. Nhỏ bro không tạm nét phu Cô tạm cho kẻ Nhóc hậu lúc nhìn chung chấp chính cảm nô Cô hai stis nhóc hậu lúc nhìn Cô flu cô nhóc hậu cho kẻ Chia cô thâu phút cho kẻ Trong cô flu cô nhóc cho kẻ Ngọc trong trên high school cô flu nhìn Nhóc hậu lúc nhìn Mô cô trong cô cho kẻ Trong cô flu cô chỉ bao Nụ siêu cho kẻ thâu cho kẻ flu Rock rồi cô lúc trong nhóc rau hậu cô trong cô cho kẻ Cô chỉ bao cô chỉ lúc cô lúc Nhóc hậu lúc nhìn chung thấp chính cảm nô Cô hai stis nhóc hậu lúc nhìn Cô flu cô nhóc hậu cho kẹp chia cô thâu phút cho kẹp Trong cô flu cô nhóc cho kẹp Ngọc trong trên high school cô flu nè Nhóc hậu lúc nít mô cô trong cô cho kẹp Trong cô flu cô chỉ bao Nhóc hậu lúc nhìn chung chấp chính cảm nô Cô hai stis nhóc hậu lúc nhìn Cô flu cô nhóc hậu cho kẹp trong trao disco Nhóc hậu lúc nhìn chung chấp trao disco Nhóc cô bao cô phao nhóc lúc nhìn